Ice cutter. Before refrigerators, teams of men cut massive blocks of ice from frozen lakes each winter, hauling them to insulated ice houses for summer delivery. It was freezing, dangerous work, and a single bad cut could send a man through the ice. Yet cities depended on them. Mechanical refrigeration ended the trade almost overnight, and ice cutters became a memory, replaced by humming machines in every kitchen. Town crier. Before newspapers and radios, the town crier was how news traveled. He'd ring a brass bell, shout announcements, and post notices in the town square. Everyone knew his voice, loud, proud, and trusted. His job faded as literacy spread and print took over. By the early 1900s, he was mostly ceremonial, a relic from when news truly came by word of mouth. Phrenologist. Once considered a science, phrenologists claimed they could read personality and intelligence by feeling the bumps on a person's skull. They'd travel town to town with a chart and calipers, giving detailed readings for a small fee. It was pure pseudoscience but wildly popular in the 1800s. When psychology and real medicine caught up, the phrenologist's tent quietly packed up for good. Leech Collector. Leech collectors spent their days wading barefoot through ponds and swamps, letting leeches latch onto their legs before peeling them off to sell to doctors. In the 1800s, bloodletting was considered good medicine, and leeches were in constant demand. It was grim, dirty work, and poorly paid. When modern medicine abandoned bloodletting, the trade simply dried up, leaving its collectors behind. Bowling alley ball returner. Before machines handled it, bowling alleys hired kids to sit behind the lanes, dodging pins and rolling heavy balls back by hand. It was risky work. One bad throw and you'd get clipped. Still, it paid pocket change and came with free games after hours. Automatic returns made it safer for everyone, but the job's danger gave it a certain legendary reputation. Rat catcher. Cities once paid men to hunt rats in alleys, docks, and sewers. Traps, poison, even small dogs were their tools. They carried proof of kills in sacks, sometimes earning a bounty per tail. It was filthy but vital work in an era when plague and disease spread fast. Once sanitation departments and modern pest control arrived, the rat catcher's job scurried quietly into history. Soda jerk. Every small-town drugstore had one. The soda jerk, white apron, and paper hat, expertly mixing fountain sodas and sundaes for kids and couples. They worked behind gleaming counters, pulling syrup handles and scooping ice cream with flair. It was part job, part performance. Fast food chains and bottled drinks ended the soda fountain era, taking the soda jerk's charm right along with it. Breaker boy. In coal towns, young boys worked as breaker boys, perched over chutes, picking rocks and slate from coal as it rattled past. It was dirty, dangerous, and paid pennies a day. Many lost fingers or worse. Child labor laws and better machinery ended the practice by the 1920s. But the photos remain. Grim reminders of how hard childhood once was. Log driver, river pig. Before trucks and railroads moved timber, log drivers, or river pigs, balanced on floating logs, guiding them downstream with long poles. One slip could mean being crushed or swept under. It was dangerous but oddly graceful work, part ballet, part brawl. When sawmills moved inland and the trucks took over, the river pigs disappeared, leaving only legends of men who danced on water. Lector. In cigar factories and textile mills, workers spent long hours doing repetitive tasks. So owners hired a lector to read aloud from newspapers, novels, and political essays. It was entertainment and education rolled into one. Workers often pitched in to pay their favorite readers. Radios made them obsolete by the 1930s, but for a time, the lector's voice carried whole rooms through the day. Resurrectionist, body snatcher. In the 1800s, medical schools needed cadavers, but laws allowed only a few. So resurrectionists filled the gap. Grave robbers who dug up freshly buried bodies and sold them to anatomy professors under cover of night. It was dangerous, grim, and often punished harshly. Once legal donations became possible, the trade died out. But their unsettling work helped advance modern medicine. Knocker-upper. Before alarm clocks were cheap, cities actually hired knocker-uppers. Men and women who walked the streets before dawn, tapping on windows with long poles or shooting peas through straws to wake workers. They'd charge a few pennies a week and remember exactly which window belonged to which shift. They vanished once alarm clocks got reliable and cheap enough to do the job without human help. Log scaler. Before sawmills used lasers and scanners, log scalers judged the value of timber by sight, measuring, estimating, and marking cuts with chalk. Their eyes could price a tree in seconds. It was skilled, solitary work done in sawdust and cold mornings. Technology took over their judgment, but old-timers still say no computer can truly read a log like a human once could. Switchboard Operator. Back when phones had cords and plugs, every call had to be connected by a person, usually a young woman with a headset at a massive switchboard. They knew half the town by voice alone. It was fast, precise work that took skill and patience. But automation and digital dialing replaced them by the 1980s, and the friendly "Operator, how may I help you?" faded away. Elevator Operator. For decades, even simple elevators had an attendant inside, usually uniformed, friendly, and trained to run the lever with perfect stops. They'd greet guests, announce floors, and sometimes chat like concierges. But automation came quietly. Buttons replaced levers, and by the 1970s, most operators were gone. Still, stepping into an old elevator today, you can almost hear the echo of going up. Pinsetter. Before automatic pinsetters, bowling alleys hired boys, called pinboys, to scramble into the pit, clear pins, and reset them between throws. It was fast, chaotic work, and stray balls sometimes flew dangerously close. They earned pennies per game, but kept alleys running. By the 1950s, machines took over, and the human pinsetter became another story of progress and automation's quiet trade-off. Lighthouse Keeper. Before automation, every coastal light had a keeper, someone who lived alone or with family, trimming wicks, cleaning lenses, and winding clockwork to keep the beacon burning. It was lonely, steady work that demanded absolute reliability. Satellite navigation and automated systems made them unnecessary, but stories of their dedication still echo along every rocky coast where human hands once kept the light alive. Typist, pool worker. Offices once had entire rooms filled with typists, Rows of women retyping business letters, invoices, and memos from handwritten drafts. Speed and accuracy were everything, and the clack of keys was constant. A single error could mean redoing a whole page. Word processors and personal computers ended the need for typing pools by the 1980s, replacing precision fingers with glowing screens. Milkman. Every morning before sunrise, the milkman made his rounds, bottles clinking, a friendly wave through kitchen windows. Families left empties on the porch, and he swapped them for full, cold ones from his crate. It was dependable, neighborly, and part of daily life. But with grocery stores, cheap refrigeration, and mass packaging, the milkman faded out. Another familiar face lost to convenience. Switchboard Hello Girl for railroads. Railroads once had their own switchboard operators, called Hello Girls, connecting calls between stations and dispatchers. They worked fast, calm, and precise, often juggling dozens of lines at once. The best could patch through emergencies in seconds. But as radio communication took over by the 1950s, the job disappeared, and the gentle chorus of "Hello, station calling" fell silent. Lamplighter. Before electric lights every evening brought out the lamplighter, a man carrying a long pole tipped with a flame. He'd walk the streets, touching each gas lamp alive, then return at dawn to snuff them out. It gave neighborhoods a sense of rhythm and safety. Electric bulbs made his trade vanish almost overnight, but for decades his light marked the start of every evening. Computer. Long before machines took over math, computers were people, usually women, hired to calculate everything from astronomical tables to payrolls by hand. They worked in teams, double-checking each other's numbers with pencil, paper, and slide rules. They were essential, invisible heroes of early science. When electronic computers arrived in the 1940s, the human version quietly disappeared, replaced by circuits and screens. Movie projectionist. Before digital cinema, every theater needed a projectionist perched high above the audience, threading 35mm film through hot, humming projectors. They'd switch reels mid-movie with perfect timing, so no one noticed the change. A single mistake could melt the frame. By the 2000s, digital projection made their skill nearly obsolete, ending a century-long craft that once brought Hollywood to life one reel at a time. Knitting machine minder. Early textile factories relied on skilled machine minders who stood over knitting looms, watching for broken threads or tangled yarn. They worked long, noisy shifts and were judged by how many perfect pieces came off their line. Automation eventually made their watchful eyes unnecessary. By the 1970s, machines could detect faults themselves, and the rhythmic dance of the knitting minder became industrial history. Herb peddler or snake oil salesman. Before medicine was regulated, towns were visited by wandering peddlers selling miracle tonics from horse-drawn wagons. They'd promise cures for everything: nerves, baldness, even heartbreak. Crowds gathered, coins changed hands, and sometimes the cure was mostly whiskey. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 ended the trade, exposing the frauds and leaving the snake oil salesman as a symbol of old-time hustle. Gong Farmer. Few jobs were fouler than the Gong Farmer, the man who emptied cesspits and outhouses before indoor plumbing. Working by night, he shoveled waste into barrels and carted it away, often paid by the ton. The stench followed him everywhere, and society treated them as untouchables. When modern sewage systems arrived, the Gong Farmer gladly became one of history's first gladly unemployed men. Gandy Dancer. Railroad maintenance crews once relied on Gandy Dancers, teams of men who used long iron bars to align tracks by hand. They'd chant rhythmic work songs to keep their movements in sync, pushing and prying the steel rails into place. It was exhausting, precise labor that kept trains running. Machines replaced them by mid-century, but the songs and teamwork lived on in folklore. Newspaper typesetter, Linotype Operator. For decades, every newspaper relied on men who operated heavy linotype machines, turning molten lead into lines of text. It was noisy, hot, and required great precision. They were the unsung backbone of the printing press. But computers and digital layout swept through the industry in the 1980s, melting away both the machines and the men who knew their rhythm by heart. Telegraph Operator, or Morse code clerk. A telegraph operator could send a message faster than any letter. Tapping out Morse code across miles of copper wire, they handled news, weather, business, even love notes one click at a time. The best could read by ear alone. Telephones and email replaced them, but for a century, the world's fastest conversations passed through the hands of these quiet professionals. Lineman Climber. In the early days of telegraphs and phones, linemen climbed wooden poles by hand, hammering iron spikes and stringing wire for miles through storms and wind. It was grueling, risky work that connected the nation long before satellites or fiber optics. Automation, bucket trucks, and safer infrastructure made the climbing linemen rare, but for decades they were the backbone of America's new voice. Switchman, Signal Tower Operator. High above train yards sat the signal tower operator or switchman, surrounded by levers controlling entire networks of tracks. He'd coordinate with stations and move switches to guide trains safely through the maze below. It took precision and perfect timing. Computers eventually took over, automating the network, and the quiet figure in the glass tower became a ghost of the railway's past. Aerodrome Spotter. During World War II and well into the Cold War, volunteers stood on rooftops and watchtowers, scanning the skies for enemy aircraft, jotting types and directions by hand. They weren't soldiers, just sharp-eyed civilians with binoculars and thermoses of coffee. Radar eventually made them unnecessary, but for a while, America's safety rested in the eyes of ordinary people watching the clouds. Powder monkey? Back in the days of wooden warships, powder monkeys were usually young boys who dashed between the ship's magazine and the cannons, carrying gunpowder charges under enemy fire. They worked fast, barefoot, and terrified, earning little more than a sailor's scraps. When steam power and safer loading systems came along, the powder monkey vanished, but their courage helped win more battles than anyone remembers. Fuller Brush Man. The Fuller Brush Man was a fixture of American neighborhoods from the 1920s through the 1960s, a door-to-door salesman with a briefcase full of brushes, brooms, and cleaning gadgets. He'd knock, smile, and hand out samples before giving his pitch. It was personal, predictable, and oddly comforting. But once big box stores and online shopping arrived, nobody needed a salesman on the porch anymore. Bowling alley scorekeeper. Before automated scoring, every bowling league needed a scorekeeper, a person with a pencil, grid sheet, and a sharp eye for spares and strikes. They sat at long tables marking each frame by hand, often while chatting and joking with the teams. Computers made their math unnecessary, but their laughter and arguments over foot faults gave leagues a bit of human warmth that machines can't replace. Radio actor. Before television, radio actors performed dramas entirely by voice, cowboys, detectives, and heroes brought to life with nothing but tone and timing. Sound effects men clanked chains or slammed doors to match the story. Millions tuned in every night. When TV took over living rooms in the 50s, the golden age of radio vanished almost overnight, and those unseen stars faded with the static. Newspaper delivery boy. Every town had them, paperboys peddling bikes before dawn, tossing rolled-up newspapers onto porches with remarkable aim. They worked rain or shine, paid by the route, and learned business early, collecting payments door to door. Home delivery became corporate, routes became motorized, and by the 2000s, the neighborhood paperboy had all but disappeared, replaced by headlines that travel faster than bicycles ever could. Elevator starter. In luxury hotels and department stores, the elevator starter managed the flow of people, deciding who rode when, greeting guests, and coordinating the operators. Dressed in uniform with a voice of authority, they brought order to vertical traffic. But as buildings modernized and self-service took over, their polished manners were no longer required. The title faded, leaving only polished brass buttons behind. Movie usher with flashlight. Every movie theater used to have ushers, teenagers in red jackets with flashlights, guiding guests to seats, shushing rowdy teens, and keeping aisles clear. It was a first job for many and gave the movies a sense of ceremony. Multiplexes and self-seating ended the need for them, but seeing that little beam of light once meant the show was about to begin. Ice delivery man, Iceman. Before refrigerators, the Iceman came daily, hauling 50-pound blocks on his shoulder from a horse-drawn wagon or early truck. He'd chip off just enough to fit into your icebox, wipe the sweat from his brow, and move on to the next house. Kids loved chasing his truck for slivers on hot days. Electric fridges ended his rounds, but for decades, summer started with the sound of tongs and melting ice